Hi, I'm Ben and welcome to my book corner. Today we're taking a look at the follow-up to John Scalzi's Old Man's War, which is the Ghost Brigades that was released in 2006. Now, Old Man's War was possibly my favourite new read of last year, so let's see how this compares and if it is a decent follow-up. As normal, we'll hit the story, the world building, the characters, the writing style, before ending on my final thoughts. So let's just jump straight in. So the first thing to say about this is that whilst this is a continuation of Old Man's War, this does not follow the same protagonist, although he is mentioned on a couple of occasions, and in fact the majority of the cast from the previous book are not in this other than Jane Sagan. Now, the basic story is that the Colonial Union have discovered that 3 alien species have secretly allied against them and are planning to wipe out humanity, or at least that's what it appears. And they have been aided by one of their own who has faked his own death and apparently defected to one of them. As a result of this, to try and get a hold of what's going on and try and give them some idea of the thoughts going through the traitor's head, they take a copy of his consciousness that they found and put it inside the body of a special forces soldier. However, due to different life experiences, the memories do not unlock, or at least not totally, although he has various different aspects of the personality there. Following, however, a highly stressful mission against one of the allied aliens to try and drive them out of the potential war, something occurs which causes a traumatic event that unlocks or leads to the unlocking of some of these memories, and the personality type becoming more in tune with that of the traitor. Eventually they manage to use this to help discover where they are, and they launch an attack, or an incursion I should say, to where the traitor is currently living. The story is actually a lot more of the focus of this book than it was in Old Man's War. I need to say that straight out the gate. And it is actually a pretty good story with some interesting twists and turns that does ask you some important questions around morality, consciousness, and what it means to be who you are. But the story is the driving focus of this compared to the other book, and I think it does a really good job. So on to the world building, and this very much builds on its predecessor in terms of how the Colonial Defence Force are, but this has more of a focus on the special forces, hence the title the Ghost Brigades. And you get a little bit more information on how they're made, and actually it expands the lore quite a bit, as there's parts of the Ghost Brigades that people don't even realise, that you could barely even recognise as human because they've been changed that much. You get a little bit of interplay between special forces soldiers and normal soldiers, and you get their sort of insight on how it feels, whereas the previous time it was the opposite way around, so that's really, really well done. You don't get a huge amount of physical world building here beyond what was in the first one. You also get some interesting sort of snippets of how the hierarchy interacts, and you get a little bit more of a worldview, especially at the back end of the book, about the alliances and counter-alliances and the secret manoeuvrings that are going on. You also get a look at 3 species in particular, however the main 2 being the Ray and the Oban, who are both very, very different, although not especially fleshed out. The Ray we've already obviously met in the previous book, but what's here makes complete sense for what they are, and again it helps read into the themes of consciousness and self, especially in terms of the Oban. So decent stuff here, does what it's meant to do, pretty good. As for the character building, and this is where it doesn't compare quite as well with Old Man's War, well that is by design in many regards. Old Man's War, you are very much looking through the eyes of a 75-year-old John Perry as he's reborn into a new body, and he still has that personality carrying over. The main protagonist of this, however, is Jared Dirac, and he is very much a blank slate, learning what it is to be a person because of the nature of the way that the brain pal is used to condition the Special Forces soldiers. They are pretty much fully functional within a day due to work that's done by the computer that's put into their head. And about the 3/4 point of the book, there is a personality shift with him, which makes complete story sense. There are personalities in here for the various supporting cast. Jane Sagan gets a lot more build compared to what she had in the previous one. It kind of builds on what you've already seen, but this is more a story-driven focus than a character-driven one, like the previous book was. So as a result of that, it falls down a little bit more on the character side, especially due to the fact that the character that we are following in this does have that kind of flip at the end, although it also asks the question, well, what if your life experiences are different? And ultimately, he doesn't make the same sort of decisions as his doppelganger does. So what's here is good. It's not as good as the previous book, however. On to writing style, and once again, this book is brilliantly paced, and I cannot state that enough. Just like Old Man's War, I managed to do this book in 2 and a bit sittings without any difficulty whatsoever, and the only reason I've not done it in less is because of outside commitments which have had to take me away from it. It's an enjoyable book to read, it flows really well, it makes complete logical sense, and there's enough mystery and intrigue within the story for you to go, oh, it's that's what's going on. And even like right at the end of the book, there's not so much a cliffhanger, but there's sort of a little twist at the end that makes it clear that, again, we're very much quite low on the rung in terms of diplomatic and rank, in terms of what we know and see, and there's a lot more going on in the universe than our character knows, and that's sort of peeled back a little bit at the end. The other thing I do like about this is there is a happy ending in here for a couple of the characters from this book and from the previous one, and there's also an interesting choice made about Jared in this book as well, which I think thematically makes a lot of sense around, you know, again, the theme of self and soul. So again, this is an exceptionally well written book and is easily as well written as the previous one. So on to my final thoughts, and this is most definitely a 4-star read for me. It is a very worthy follow-up to Old Man's War. I'll definitely be continuing with the series after this. The biggest pro with this is a far more story-focused book than the previous one. The negative for me is that due to the nature of the main protagonist, there's a little bit less in terms of characterization, although there is a lot more character development in itself. But this is a really good read. If you've read Old Man's War, I would highly recommend that you read this as well, providing of course you enjoyed the previous one. And this continues the really strong start that I've actually had with the John Scalzi books, and I'm looking forward to reading the follow-up, which I believe is The Last Colony, or it's Zoe's Tale. I can't remember off the top of my head, but we'll definitely be looking at those at some point soon. But what I'd like to know is, have you read this book? How did you find it compared to Old Man's War? Did you enjoy it? And are there any books that you think I should read, having such high opinion of these? Let me know in the comments below. A like and a follow are always appreciated, but never required. I'll catch you all next time.